I'm Carrie Mason from the Vic High class of 1967 and now an art historian at the University of Victoria. Emily Carr is Victoria's most famous artist. When she died in 1945, her work was known throughout Canada. She's now known around the world for her paintings of First Nations totems and villages, and also her paintings of our coastal rainforests, all of which were showcased in a solo exhibition in London in 2015. Now, for far too long, many people have believed that Emily Carr was poor. They also believed she was a poor student. This view was perpetuated by Emily Carr herself in her various autobiographical writings, but also by those who think artists have to be poor and starving in order to be a success. In reality, Emily Carr was anything but poor. She was born in 1871 into an upper-middle-class family here in Victoria, where she was the youngest of 5 sisters. The Carr sisters' father, Richard Carr, was a prosperous merchant who left his daughters well off. Indeed, in 1913, at the height of a depression, Emily Carr was able to build this apartment house on Simcoe Street in James Bay, and thus support herself as an artist. Emily Carr also perpetuated the idea that she wasn't a scholar. As she wrote in her autobiography, The Book of Small, "I hated school." Now, it's true that Emily Carr was not a good student in the traditional sense. Although she enjoyed primary school, once she reached Vic High in 1888, she ran into difficulty. In fact, she left a year before graduating. But Emily Carr was far from stupid. She was just studying the wrong subjects. After she left Vic High, she attended art school, first in San Francisco at the California School of Design, then at the Westminster School of Art in London, and later at the Académie Colarossi in Paris. Emily began teaching art here in Victoria in 1894. Following her studies in England, she resumed her teaching career in 1905 in Vancouver, initially in a studio on Broadway and later on Hastings. But more than just an inspiring teacher, Emily Carr was, above all, a painter who taught us to see the rhythm and movement in the sweeping arms of the cedar trees. She helped us appreciate the landscape surrounding the gravel pits in Metchosin, and made us appreciate the immensity of the arching sky above the Dallas Road cliffs. Despite her dislike of anything academic, she became a writer. Although she preferred to forget anything to do with Vic High, especially as her years there coincided with the deaths of her parents, 2 principals from our school did play an important role in her later life. It was Principal Ira Dilworth who read early drafts of Emily Carr's stories. Dilworth helped her get them published in her first book, Clewick. He also read the stories on the CBC and helped Emily publish several more books, among which were The House of All Sorts and The Book of Small. Yet another principal from Vic High came into Emily Carr's life. Harry Smith presided as Master of Ceremonies over the celebration of her 70th birthday in 1941, which coincided with the celebration of her being awarded the Governor-General's Medal for Clewick. Although Emily Carr wrote in her autobiography, "I wished I'd been a better student," just 3 days before she died in the early spring of 1945, she was advised that UBC was about to award her an honorary doctorate. She was so pleased that, as she wrote in a letter to Ira Dilworth, she wanted to shout the news to everyone in the Priory nursing home who had treated her like a half-wit. Likewise, I'm certain that Emily Carr would, to use one of her own phrases, have burst her buttons if she'd known that Vic High was making her an honorary member of its alumnus. But that's precisely what we're doing. From Vic High, in 1888, one of our most famous students, Emily Carr.